General Reinhard Heydrich, leader of the Gestapo and high-ranking officer of the SS, was one of the most feared figures in the Third Reich, the mastermind behind the Holocaust and the final solution. His death in an attack organized by Czech commandos, who parachuted in from England, would lead to the killing of hundreds of people as reprisal in Czechoslovakia. Reinhard Heydrich was born on the 7th of March, 1904, in the city of Halle an der Saale in Saxony, Germany. His entire family came from a musical background, with his father being a well-known musician and opera singer at the Halle Conservatory, while his mother was a pianist and a devout Catholic in a region where Protestantism, curiously, was the majority religion. Like his parents, from a very young age, Heydrich showed an interest in music, demonstrating talent with both the violin and the piano. When the First World War broke out in 1914, at only 10 years of age, he enrolled in the Civil Defense Volunteer Corps, responsible for auxiliary tasks in the rear guard. Once the conflict ended in 1918, and with an adventurous adolescent spirit, he joined the Freikorps militia, within which he fought in a series of street clashes against the communists during the German Civil War. In 1922, Heydrich displeased his parents when he announced that he was abandoning his music studies to join the Navy of the Weimar Republic, the Reichsmarine, immediately upon turning 18 years old. Thus, he entered the Naval Officer School at the Kiel base, where for 9 years he served as an exemplary sailor in administrative duties, earning the admiration of Admiral Wilhelm Canaris, who praised his work as an organizer in intelligence-related matters. He also stood out for his athletic skills, since in addition to practicing swimming, sailing, and fencing, his height of 1.85 m gave him an excellent physical aptitude. However, his military career was cut short in 1931 due to his involvement in a case of unwanted pregnancy with the daughter of a naval contractor of IG Farben, who had business with Admiral Erich Raeder. This incident led to his dishonorable discharge by the Navy Court of Honor. Coinciding precisely with his expulsion from the German Navy, on the very 1st of May 1931, Heydrich joined the National Socialist German Workers' Party, NSDAP, in Hamburg, and its armed paramilitary wing, the SS. During this period, he stood out as an excellent organizer, because in less than 2 years, in 1932, he rose to the rank of Brigadier General, or SS Brigadeführer, and became one of the favorites of the Reichsführer of the SS, Heinrich Himmler. As a result of these merits, and after blackmailing President Paul Hindenburg into appointing Adolf Hitler as Chancellor, threatening him after finding a document implicating his son Oskar Hindenburg in a corruption case, in 1933, when the Führer came to power and founded the Third Reich, appointed Heydrich to command the SS in Munich, then to lead the entire militia in Bavaria, and finally named him Chief of Security in Berlin. Outside political and military life, Heydrich also formed his own family after marrying a woman named Lena Mathilde von Osten. From this marriage, 4 children were born, whom they named Klaus, Heider, Silke, and Martha. When the Reichstag, the German parliament, was set on fire on the 27th of February 1933, Heydrich was one of those in charge of carrying out the arrests of those deemed responsible and bringing the communist Marinus van der Lubbe to justice, who was executed the following year. During the Night of the Long Knives in 1934, Heydrich efficiently directed the SS, arresting and executing in the purge all the leaders of the SA, including Ernst Röhm, who curiously was the godfather of his own eldest son, Klaus. As a reward for this flawless operation, which granted absolute power to the SS, Hitler promoted Heydrich to Supreme Chief of Security of the entire Third Reich. Heydrich's rapid rise in the NSDAP provoked envy among many of his comrades, who attempted to politically undermine him. For example, on one occasion they spread the false accusation that he belonged to the Jewish race, a rumor that almost cost him his position, until a tribunal rigorously examined his family tree and confirmed that it had all been an elaborate lie. In fact, the real reason for the hatred toward Heydrich was fear, for he controlled the intelligence service and therefore the files of all party members, in addition to being utterly ruthless toward those who broke the rules. Wilhelm Frick forbade him entry into the Ministry of the Interior to prevent him from prying into documents. Hitler once said of him, "He has a heart of stone," while Heydrich himself defined his role as being the chief in charge of the garbage dump of the German Reich. During Kristallnacht in 1938, Heydrich ordered the gendarmerie not to intervene against the wave of popular violence directed at the Jews, which resulted in the deaths of numerous people and the destruction of hundreds of businesses and synagogues. The following year, in 1939, Hitler promoted him to chief of the Reich Main Security Office, placing under his command the Gestapo, the Kripo, criminal police, and the SD, with his rank in the SS being only one step below Himmler. Moments before the outbreak of the Second World War, on the night of the 31st of August to the 1st of September 1939, Heydrich launched Operation Reinhard, which consisted of dressing murdered prisoners in German soldier uniforms, then staging a shooting at the Gleiwitz radio station and blaming the incident on Poland, in the hope that Great Britain and France would remain neutral. The scheme failed, however, because on the 3rd of September, London and Paris declared war on Germany. Not all of Heydrich's deceptions failed during the conflict. Operation Kruger was an overwhelming success, introducing 140 million counterfeit British pounds into England, which destabilized the country's high finance and caused severe inflation. Another of Heydrich's traits was his skill in extreme sports, particularly in piloting aircraft. For example, aboard a Luftwaffe plane, he carried out several reckless missions. First during the invasion of Norway in 1940, and later in the campaign against the Soviet Union in 1941. It was during the latter that his aircraft was shot down, forcing Heydrich to make an emergency landing in an area under Red Army control. Miraculously, and against all odds, he managed to evade Soviet patrols sent to capture him and return unscathed to German lines. Understandably, this daring behavior earned him a severe reprimand from Hitler, who accused him of being utterly reckless for risking capture by the enemy, when he was the man who knew more secrets than anyone in the Third Reich. As a consequence of the Second World War, in the Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia, formerly Czechoslovakia, a wave of demonstrations and strikes by the Czech population against the German occupiers forced the dismissal of Reich Protector Konstantin von Neurath in favor of Reinhard Heydrich, who assumed charge of this new administration. On the 29th of September 1941, the leader of the Gestapo ultimately earned the nickname the Butcher of Prague for arresting and executing any dissident. At the same time, however, he implemented social measures that reduced protests among the Czech population, such as raising workers' wages, increasing social security benefits, and reducing working hours. On the 20th of January 1942, Reinhard Heydrich was chosen as the highest representative of the SS during the Wannsee Conference. As host of this meeting, Heydrich outlined before all those present, mostly NSDAP members and representatives from various ministries of the Reich, the plan for the final solution, through which the Holocaust would be implemented, the gathering, deportation, and extermination in concentration camps by means of gas chambers of millions of Jews from across Europe. In fact, the previous year, the Blonde Beast, as his enemies called him, had already been responsible in Ukraine for the massacre of 35,000 people, mostly Jews, during the mass shootings at Babi Yar. Meanwhile, in Great Britain, Prime Minister Winston Churchill expressed his dissatisfaction with the Czech resistance, since, unlike other occupied nations, it had carried out very few armed actions against Third Reich authorities. For this reason, it was decided to employ the Czechoslovak Infantry Brigade, made up of exiles serving in the British Army, to parachute into Prague and assassinate Reich Protector Reinhard Heydrich. Thus, under the name of Operation Anthropoid, 3 Czech paratroopers, Josef Valkik, Jan Kubis, and Josef Gabčík, jumped from a Royal Air Force plane on the outskirts of the Czechoslovak capital and went into hiding for 5 months in the underground, studying Heydrich's daily movements one by one. On the morning of the 27th of May, 1942, the Czech commandos Josef Valkik, Jan Kubis, and Josef Gabčík prepared an ambush against Heydrich's car at an intersection between Holosová Street and Zenklova Street, knowing that this spot formed part of the Reich Protector's daily 25-kilometer route aboard his Mercedes-Benz Cabriolet, license plate S3, from his residence in Jungfern Breslau to Prague Castle. Curiously, on the day of the attack, Heydrich was delayed by 1 hour, which almost aborted the mission, until Valkik, using the reflection of a mirror from a distance, signaled to his 2 companions that the car was approaching, with Heydrich in the back seat and his driver, Johannes Klein, at the wheel. As soon as Gabčík had his target within firing range, he raised his Sten submachine gun, which at the last instant jammed. Heydrich, who saw everything, realized what was happening and drew his Luger pistol to defend himself. However, at that precise moment, Kubis threw a grenade that exploded against the rear wheel, scattering shrapnel over the car's body. At first, the action seemed to have failed, because Heydrich stepped out of the vehicle and fired at Kubis, who miraculously escaped by jumping onto a bicycle. The driver, Klein, also chased Gabčík for several meters until the latter stopped and opened fire, wounding him slightly before fleeing into the nearby vegetation. Once the shooting ended, Heydrich returned to the car, only then noticing an intense pain in his back, as a piece of grenade shrapnel had struck him. Immediately after the attack by the Czech resistance, Reinhard Heydrich was taken to Bulovka Hospital, which was cordoned off by armed SS men. Upon arrival, fearing that Czech doctors might try to kill him, he ordered that only German professionals attend to him. For this reason, he had to wait a long time until Heinrich Himmler arrived with his full medical team. According to the official medical report, the wounds were not fatal, and his health even seemed to improve for several days. However, against all expectations, after about a week, Heydrich's condition worsened dramatically. An X-ray revealed that fragments of horsehair from the car seat had remained inside the wound, slowly causing a septic infection. Unable to do anything to save him, Heydrich died on the 4th of June, 1942, at the age of 38. Almost as if he were a head of state, Reinhard Heydrich was granted a spectacular ceremony in his honor, as ordered by Adolf Hitler. First, a massive demonstration was organized in Prague, gathering more than 1.5 million people, before his coffin was transported aboard a train, accompanied by an SS honor guard, all the way to the Chancellery in Berlin. Finally, his body was placed in a funeral car that paraded through the streets of the capital to the sound of the Siegfried Funeral March, composed by Richard Wagner, before being buried at the Invalidenfriedhof Cemetery. The Reich protector Reinhard Heydrich was the first and last high-ranking SS officer to be eliminated in an assassination during the Second World War. Curiously, he would be remembered more in death than in life, for in retaliation the SS executed more than 5,000 Czech dissidents across Czechoslovakia, in addition to carrying out the Lidice massacre, in which the entire village was destroyed as an example, and all of its 250 inhabitants, men, women, and children, were killed. Heinrich Himmler, head of the SS and Knight of the Black Order, became the very embodiment of esotericism and mystery during National Socialist Germany. He was the architect of the extermination of millions during the Holocaust, while at the same time the mastermind behind one of the most efficient police systems in the world. Heinrich Leopold Himmler was born on the 7th of October, 1900, in Munich, Germany, into an upper-middle-class, Catholic, and very traditional family. His father, Gebhard Himmler, was a distinguished professor of classical languages and philosophy, while his mother, Anna Maria Haida, was a conservative housewife. He was the second of 3 brothers, the eldest, Gebhard Ludwig Himmler, Heinrich himself, and the youngest, Ernst Himmler. As for his godfather, the chosen one was Prince Heinrich of Bavaria, a descendant of Bavarian royalty, whom his father had tutored and whose name he had given his son. Himmler's childhood was a happy one, as his family provided him with every comfort, such as sending him to the school at Landshut, where he excelled in Latin, Greek, mathematics, history, and Germanic culture, the last 2 his favorites, largely because of his father's nationalism, which he absorbed. Outside of school, he loved collecting stamps, walking by Lake Isar, and admiring the orchards, due to his great passion for agriculture and rural life. Yet he was never athletic and always clumsy in everything related to physical exercise, a consequence of his fragile and weak body, a problem he could not overcome, even by lifting dumbbells every day. When the First World War broke out in 1914, Himmler saw the chance to become a soldier of the Second German Reich and a hero. It took him a long time to gain his father's authorization since he was underage, but even when he did, the various recruitment offices rejected him because of his frail constitution. This deeply affected him, as he longed to avenge the death of his godfather, Prince Heinrich of Bavaria, who had been killed in combat. Eventually, it was the 1st Bavarian Infantry Regiment that admitted him into its ranks after numerous failed attempts to enlist. Unfortunately, just as he was completing his training in 1918 and preparing to depart for the Western Front, the Great War ended with Germany's defeat. Frustrated at not having participated in the First World War, Himmler was forced to return to civilian life and witness how revolutionary chaos overtook Germany, as the Bolsheviks proclaimed the Bavarian Soviet Republic in Munich. In response to this dangerous situation, he enlisted in a nationalist militia called the Freikorps Oberland, with which he fought alongside the army of the Weimar Republic against the Bavarian Red Army. By the end of 1918, constitutional order had been restored and the revolutionaries defeated. The following year, after peace had been declared in 1919, Himmler entered the Technical University of Munich to study agronomy, from which he graduated as an agronomist in 1922. Like his brother Gebhard, and influenced by him, Himmler decided to join a well-known veterans association from the Great War known as the Reich Warflag, Reichskriegsflagge, which was led by a former combatant named Ernst Röhm. It was precisely this man with whom Himmler struck up a close friendship who introduced him to the National Socialist German Workers' Party, NSDAP, led by Adolf Hitler. Completely fascinated by the movement, Himmler joined the NSDAP in August 1923 with membership card number 14,303 and enlisted in the SA militia. With them, he took part in the failed Munich Putsch of November, which ended with the imprisonment of much of the National Socialist leadership. After the failure of the Munich Putsch in 1924, Himmler began working as the personal secretary of Gregor Strasser, head of the NSDAP in Bavaria. Although the salary was meager, it allowed him to live a modest life. The following year, in 1925, Himmler was among the 280 men who initially founded the SAS, which soon rose to become the Führer's elite guard. It was precisely within this organization that Himmler demonstrated his strong administrative skills, which in 1927 earned him a promotion from Gregor Strasser to deputy leader of the NSDAP in Lower Bavaria. In fact, within the SS itself, he had the chance to draw closer to Hitler, to whom he proposed a revolutionary change, increasing the power of this militia at the expense of the SA, then led by Ernst Röhm, a project that the Führer eventually authorized, knowing that such an initiative would strengthen his position within the NSDAP. On a personal level, Himmler created a family after falling in love with Margarete Boden, a divorced woman from a previous marriage who was 7 years older than him. She was 35 when he was only 28. The two met during a vacation in Bad Reichenhall when Himmler entered a hotel and saw her sitting on a nearby bench. He politely removed his Tyrolean hat and gently sprinkled her with snow. That moment was love at first sight, and the two soon married in 1928. From this marriage was born a daughter, Gudrun Himmler, and later they adopted a boy, whom they named Gerhard Himmler. Thanks to Himmler's marriage to Margaret, the young SS officer's income began to increase, as in addition to his salary as a member of the NSDAP, he could also count on his wife's income as a nurse and director of a homeopathic clinic. Shortly after, when the Himmlers sold that health center for a good sum, they opened a farm in Waltrudering, near Munich, from which the family began to earn another 200 marks a month by selling farm products and chickens. Incredibly, in 1929, Adolf Hitler himself appointed Heinrich Himmler as leader of the SS, following the dismissal of its previous chief, Reinhard. From then on, the new head of the organization worked tirelessly. First, to win the streets in clashes against the communists, and second, to reduce the power of the SA. Thus, he reorganized the SS into a shock force open only to the most select men who had to pass strict physical, racial, and intellectual examinations, as well as endure extremely harsh training, combined with a frugal diet based on oatmeal soup and mineral water. Himmler also introduced the famous black uniforms that made SS volunteers popular among the German population, and he was the intellectual author of the motto, "My honor is called loyalty." From these reforms, results soon followed. The communists were gradually driven out of the street brawls, and the SS also prevented a coup attempt by the SA against the NSDAP leadership in Brandenburg, Hesse, Pomerania, Silesia, and Mecklenburg. These events made Himmler one of Hitler's favorite collaborators. When the NSDAP seized power in Germany in 1933, and Adolf Hitler was elected Chancellor and Führer of the Third Reich, Heinrich Himmler was simultaneously appointed Reichsführer SS. Under this new title, he institutionalized the SS under the name Allgemeine SAS, transforming them into the new political police of the regime, with more than 50,000 men in its ranks. Simultaneously, Himmler established the Central Security Office of the Reich, the Gestapo, and also inherited from the former Weimar Republic all the police records of the country, including those of Hitler himself and other members of the NSDAP, files he would not hesitate to use for personal benefit on several occasions throughout his life. Holding the rank of Reichsführer SS, Himmler's first measures were to send his squads into the streets against members of the German Communist Party, to intimidate various Christian or social democratic politicians, and to boycott Jewish businesses through assaults or forced closures. In fact, after the burning of the Reichstag, of which he was also a deputy, Himmler was the one chosen to carry out the arrest of thousands of people once all constitutional rights had been legally suspended. Precisely in that year, 1933, Himmler inaugurated the Dachau concentration camp, through which thousands of prisoners would pass. Not even his former comrades of the SA were spared, because after the Night of the Long Knives of 1934, the SS purged all dissident National Socialists, including old friends such as Ernst Röhm and Gregor Strasser. Thanks to this decisive blow, in which the SS imposed themselves over the SA, Heinrich Himmler became the most powerful man in Germany after Hitler. Under the name of the Black Order, the SS effectively became a state within the state of the Third Reich, with Reichsführer Heinrich Himmler as its supreme leader. The SS themselves decided who could join and who could not, based on physical examinations, tests of knowledge, and racial purity requirements, which demanded proof of Aryan ancestry going back to 1750. Once a candidate was admitted, he underwent military and ideological training, adopting as a fundamental dogma both sport and the cult of the body. For the younger generations and children, schools known as Napolis were created, usually located in camps in the middle of nature or in medieval castles. As for Christianity, it was suppressed, while SS weddings were officiated in a pagan style, with the ritual of bread and salt. The same applied to births. For example, every time a child was born from an SS marriage, Himmler would give the parents a blue silk bib, a ribbon of the same color, a cup, and a spoon. If the birth coincided with his own birthday on the 7th of October, Himmler himself would attend the ritual. If the SS became famous in popular imagination for something, it was for their mystical and esoteric character. Himmler turned the Black Order into the heir of the Teutonic Order, following the model of the Jesuits, with the intention of creating a Teutonic knighthood of Nordic race inspired by the ancient Thule society, of which he had been a member in his youth. In fact, Himmler proclaimed himself Grand Master of his Black Order, believing that he was the reincarnation of King Henry the Fowler of Saxony, who in the 10th century had led the Germanic people to victory against the Slavs and Magyars. Normally, this type of esoteric ceremonies took place in the castle of Wewelsburg, a medieval fortress with a hall in which the Black Sun rune was engraved and where an extensive library on magical subjects was compiled. As could not be otherwise, the mysticist postulates were transferred as mandatory dogma to all SS members without exception, forcing them to abandon Christianity and embrace a reinvented pagan religion with the gods Wotan and Odin, to celebrate the solstices of summer and winter, to study the classics of Hindu, Buddhist, Tibetan, or Shinto beliefs, or to accept the theories of karma according to reincarnation. In the same way, he carried out racial and spiritual studies through the Society for the Research and Teaching of Ancestral Heritage, Ahnenerbe, and financed scientific expeditions to Tibet, such as that of Heinrich Harrer in search of the origin of the voyages to Languedoc and Montserrat, like those of Otto Rahn in search of the Holy Grail. He also devoted himself to solving mythical enigmas, such as the discovery of the mystery of Gothic spires, the disappearance of the Harp of Ulster, the birth of the Rosicrucian Brotherhood, or the Viking point system. In fact, one of the most striking things was becoming, together with the biologist Ernst Schaefer, one of the leaders of a society of alchemists attempting to obtain gold according to the theories of Michel de Nostradamus. When the Second World War began in 1939, Himmler's SS became the instrument of police control over all of Europe as the Third Reich occupied one country after another. Thus, between 1938 and 1941, the Reichsführer came to be responsible for security and punitive actions over Austria, Czechoslovakia, Poland, Norway, Denmark, Belgium, the Netherlands, Luxembourg, France, Greece, Yugoslavia, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Ukraine, Belarus, and Western Russia. He was also in charge of repopulation in the eastern territories of Warthegau, Silesia, or Posen, and of Germanization through German settlers after the forced expulsion of Polish minorities. Another of his functions was the design of a model for the SS based on the Wehrburgen, consisting of the construction of a series of medieval castles over the Russian Lebensraum, whose lifestyle was to be centered on the rejection of technology, mastery of horses as riders once did, and a diet focused on cheese, milk, and meat. During the Second World War, Reichsführer Heinrich Himmler became the moral author and executor of the Holocaust through the SS and his closest collaborators, embodied by Reinhard Heydrich and after his death by Adolf Eichmann. The first measures taken by Himmler were to isolate the Jews in enclosures such as the Warsaw Ghetto, or in reserves such as Lublin, mostly in Poland, which claimed a great number of victims due to disease and starvation. Afterwards, a series of compounds was opened to house Polish political prisoners, mostly captured Soviet and Yugoslav soldiers, but also British, American, French, Roma, Christian militants, Spanish Republicans, homosexuals, or Jehovah's Witnesses, who were turned into slaves to serve as labor for the military industry, just as they did working relentlessly in the concentration camps of Mauthausen, Buchenwald, Bergen-Belsen, Ravensbrück, Theresienstadt, Neuengamme, Sachsenhausen, Dora Mittelbau, Hinzert, Stutthof, Gross Rosen, Amersfoort, and others. Shortly after, When the invasion of the Soviet Union took place in 1941, Himmler encouraged the local populations of Lithuanians, Latvians, Belarusians, and Ukrainians to kill their own Jewish neighbors in pogroms such as those of Białystok, Vilnius, Kaunas, and others, in addition to deploying over Russia extermination squads baptized as Einsatzkommandos, charged with eradicating Jewish inhabitants from the Lebensraum. These claimed the lives of more than 1 million people through mass shootings and massacres such as those of Babi Yar, Vinnytsia, Ponary, and Rumbula. However, the most extreme step took place in 1942 after Himmler authorized the final solution, consisting of the complete destruction of European Jews. The formula to carry out this gigantic task was the establishment of the 6 extermination camps of Auschwitz, Treblinka, Sobibor, Belzec, Chelmno, and Majdanek, whose facilities became true factories of death, where 4 million Jews from Poland, Hungary, Germany, the Netherlands, Czechoslovakia, France, Italy, Slovakia, Belgium, Norway, and Denmark were exterminated in gas chambers after having been deported by rail from their countries of origin. Another of the functions for which Himmler became infamous during the Second World War was the creation of the Waffen-SS, a military branch of the SS that became the first international army in the world. Curiously, and despite the fact that at first Himmler promoted the project to compete with the German army, the Wehrmacht, through a series of elite units such as the 1st SS Panzer Division, Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler, the 2nd SS Panzer Division des Reich, the 3rd SS Panzer Division Totenkopf, the 4th SS Police Division Polizei, and the 5th SS Panzer Division Viking. The Waffen-SS was soon expanded with Nordic volunteers from the Norwegian SS Grenadier Regiment Norge and the Danish SS Grenadier Regiment, the Finnish SS Mountain Battalion Finnishes, the 3rd SS Grenadier Company Schwedische, the 23rd and 34th SS Grenadier Divisions Nederland and Landstorm Nederland, the 27th SS Grenadier Division Langemark of Flemish Belgians, or a mix of Scandinavians in the 6th SS Mountain Division Nord and the 1st SS Grenadier Division Nordland, not counting the ethnic German minorities from other nations such as the 7th SS Mountain Division, Prince Eugen formed in Yugoslavia, and the 31st SS Grenadier Division Böhmen-Mähren in Czechoslovakia. Other unusual units also emerged, such as the SS Panzer Division Hitlerjugend, made up of underage members of the Hitler Youth, the 18th SS Grenadier Division Horst Wessel with affiliates from the SA, and the 38th SS Grenadier Division Nibelungen with cadets from the military school of Bad Tölz. Alongside these were more standard divisions such as the 8th SS Cavalry Division Florian Geyer, the 9th and 10th SS Panzer Divisions Hohenstaufen and Frundsberg, and the 162nd SS Grenadier Divisions Reichsführer Götz von Berlichingen and Janus. Thus, little by little, the shift went from German fighters to Nordic ones, and then to any race and nationality, as happened with the 13th SS Mountain Division Handschar of Croats, the 14th SS Grenadier Division Galician of Ukrainians, the 15th and 19th SS Grenadier Divisions of Latvians, Lettische and Lettische Zweite, the 20th SS Grenadier Division Estnische of Estonians, the 21st SS Grenadier Division Skanderbeg of Albanians, the 22nd and 37th SS Cavalry Divisions Maria Theresa and Lutzo of Hungarians, the 23rd SS Mountain Division Kama of Bosnian Muslims, the 28th SS Grenadier Division Wallonian of Belgian Walloons, the 29th SS Grenadier Division Italienische of Italians, the 29th SS Grenadier Division Russische of Russians, the 30th SS Grenadier Division Weißruthenische of Belarusians, the 33rd SS Grenadier Division Charlemagne of Frenchmen, the SS Grenadier Division Romanian of Romanians, the SS Grenadier Regiment Bulgarische of Bulgarians, the SS Grenadier Regiment Turkestanische of Turkestanis, the 15th SS Cossack Cavalry Corps, the SS Indian Legion Indian, the Georgian Legion Georgian, the Armenian Legion Armenian, the Azerbaijani Legion Azerbaijan, the North Caucasian Legion Nordkaukasische, the 1st SS Tatar Mountain Brigade Tatarische, the Spanish SS Unit Esquerra, the SS British Free Corps, and the 1st SS Special Detachment Serbian in Belgrade, among others. In this way, approximately 1 million foreign soldiers passed through the Waffen-SS, of whom 1/3 fell in combat, and with whom Himmler attempted to organize a universal and multicultural National Socialist army that included Germans, Dutch, Ukrainians, Hungarians, Norwegians, Danes, Belgians, both Walloons and Flemings, Frenchmen, Italians, Croats, Bosnian Muslims, Serbs, Russians, Belarusians, Cossacks, Georgians, Armenians, Azerbaijanis, North Caucasians, Indians, Arabs, Romanians, Bulgarians, Slovaks, Finns, Swedes, Swiss, Spaniards, British, Irish, Portuguese, Chinese, Mongols, North Americans, South Americans, Australians, New Zealanders, and others. When the assassination attempt against Hitler took place on July 20th, 1944, by German army officers of the Wehrmacht in Rastenburg, the Führer appointed Himmler as commander of the reserve army, believing that the Reichsführer would remain loyal to him. Nevertheless, and against all expectations, Himmler began to establish secret contacts with the Allies through Sweden, thanks to the mediation of Count Folke Bernadotte of the Red Cross, to whom he proposed using concentration camp prisoners as bargaining chips to negotiate peace. Precisely, and as a gesture of goodwill, at the beginning of 1945, Himmler reached an agreement with Norbert Masur, representative of the World Jewish Congress, chartering the so-called white buses that evacuated more than 20,000 prisoners from Germany to neutral Switzerland. Meanwhile, unaware of what the Reichsführer was plotting, Hitler promoted Himmler to commander of Army Group Vistula, a position in which he demonstrated his incompetence as a military leader, since lacking combat experience, all the troops under his command were crushed by the Red Army. Coinciding with Hitler's 56th birthday on April 20th, 1945, Himmler personally went to the Berlin Chancellery to congratulate the Führer and toast him, not knowing that this would be the last time he would see him alive. The next day, April 21st, Himmler began to shape his betrayal by meeting with the Jew Norbert Masur at Kirsten's house, a discreet residence on the outskirts of Harswald, where he told him in a serious tone, "What is past is past." 2 days later, on the 23rd, the Reichsführer showed once again his intention to collaborate with the Allies by handing over to the Red Cross more than 7,000 Jewish women from the Ravensbrück concentration camp. As gratitude for the liberation of these young women, Himmler's Jewish contacts brought the case before the British Foreign Minister Anthony Eden, who listened to Himmler's proposals and presented them to the Chamber of the United Nations Organization in New York on April 27th. The Reichsführer's offer was rejected. Within 24 hours of the refusal, on April 28, 1945, the BBC radio in London announced to the entire world that Himmler had begun peace negotiations with Great Britain. Such was the impact of the news on Hitler that after suffering a fit of rage, he immediately ordered the arrest and execution of the Reichsführer as a traitor. Unfortunately for him, Himmler was never found, and 2 days later, on April 30th, Hitler committed suicide in the bunker under the Chancellery without being able to carry out his revenge. Immediately after Hitler's death, the Third Reich established the Flensburg government under Admiral Karl Dönitz, who rejected the offer from Himmler and another 150 SS followers to continue at the head of the organization after having presented themselves at the port of Lübeck for such a purpose. Although for a few days the Reichsführer tried to change Dönitz's mind, the admiral politely declined the help and thanked him for his services before dissolving the SS and initiating surrender negotiations with the Allies. Faced with this refusal, and unable to exercise any power in Flensburg, Himmler planned his escape under the false name of Heinrich Hitzinger, a supposed sergeant of the Wehrmacht. Himmler marched toward Western Germany to surrender to the Allies and avoid falling into the hands of the Red Army. To that end, he shaved off his mustache and placed a bandage on his head to appear as if he were wounded. Finally, his capture took place at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on May 21st, 1945, in Neustadt, specifically after surrendering to the troops of the British Second Army, who guarded the Bremerbrücke Bridge between the town of Minden, which interconnected Hamburg with Bremerhaven. Curiously, and without being recognized at any point by the English soldiers, the false Heinrich Hitzinger was interned in the prisoner camp of Lüneburg and lodged in Section 31. Only 2 days after his captivity, on May 23, 1945, Himmler was recognized by the British Army troops. The man responsible for the discovery was Captain Tom Sylvester, who searched his body thoroughly to prevent him from poisoning himself with a hidden substance. Since the English found nothing concealed on him, they allowed him to dress and have dinner at 8 o'clock. However, still distrustful, they decided to carry out another, more advanced inspection that same night, this time directed by Sergeant Major Edwin Austin. On this occasion, as soon as he was ordered to undress, Himmler refused, saying, "Don't you know who I am?" To which Austin replied, I know. You are Himmler. I recognized you immediately. Now undress." The Reichsführer obeyed without resistance until the interrogators attempted to open his jaw after glimpsing a small object on the right side of his lower molar. It was then that Himmler quickly twisted his neck and swallowed a potassium cyanide capsule he had hidden in his mouth. The English immediately lunged to stop him, but it was too late. Himmler began to suffer spasms and convulsions from the effect of the poison. A doctor rushed in and attempted to save his life by performing a stomach wash and applying artificial respiration. Sadly, it was too late, and after terrible pain, at midnight, the doctor certified that Heinrich Himmler was dead. The death of the Reichsfuhrer of the SS left the Western Allies stunned, as they had planned to bring him to trial to answer for his crimes before justice. Evidently, faced with his unexpected end, they had to settle for wrapping his body in a military blanket and burying it in an unknown location in the Lüneburg forest. Thus disappeared a man who had designed one of the largest police systems in Europe, who had tried to resurrect old mythological legends around the Black Order, had driven the creation of a multinational army with the Waffen SS, and who had murdered millions of people through one of the most terrible extermination programs.